25. Witnesses this morning are Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, Undersecretary of Defense Comptroller Mike McCord, and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff General C.Q. Brown, Jr. I'd like to take a moment to recognize that this is General Brown's first posture hearing before the committee as Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. We're grateful for our witnesses for their service and for their testimony today. This is a critical moment for our national security. There is broad consensus among Congress, the White House, and the Department of Defense about the threats we face. We know that China seeks to challenge the security and economic interests of the United States and our allies, and that it increasingly has the ability to do so. We know that Vladimir Putin is committed to recreating his vision of the old Soviet Empire, and that his war against Ukraine is one step toward that vision. And we know that Iran is seeking to exploit the war between Israel and Hamas, expel the United States from the region, and further sabotage the free world's role in the Middle East. It is worth noting that each of these threats I just mentioned can be addressed through the National Security Supplemental that the Senate passed nearly 2 months ago. The bill would support Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan, provide humanitarian relief in Gaza, and replenish the U.S. defense industrial base. Indeed, the dire humanitarian crisis in Gaza and the separate fight for freedom in Ukraine demand our immediate attention. The most important step Congress can take right now is to pass this legislation, and I urge the House to vote on it. Last month, President Biden released his fiscal year 2025 budget request for the Department of Defense, with a top line of $850 billion. I understand that this budget is below what the department had planned for fiscal year 2025, but it adheres to the caps set by last year's debt ceiling agreement known as the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2023. In effect, the Department of Defense had to follow the law and submit this level of funding to the Congress. I expect we will stand in recess for a moment. We will resume. Senator, it's a liability of being unusually tall. Again, the department is responding to the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2023 in terms of the budget they had to present. And I expect there'll be a discussion today about whether this top line is adequate to meet the national security challenges we face. This was a demand by Republicans in the House in order for us to pass the debt ceiling, and that has constrained your operations and your budgeting, and we understand that. With those limits in mind, the President's defense budget request aligns well to the national security threats before us. As the National Defense Strategy makes clear, the United States is in a long-term strategic competition with China and Russia, and we will continue to face persistent threats from Iran, North Korea, violent extremist groups, and issues like climate change. During today's hearing, I would ask our witnesses to explain how the President's fiscal year 2025 budget request supports the National Defense Strategy, the Nuclear Posture Review, and the Missile Defense Review. Keeping our competition with China front and center, this budget request includes $9.9 billion for priorities covered by the Pacific Defense Initiative, or PDI. I am encouraged by the progress we have made through PDI thus far, and this committee will continue working to help improve the design and posture of the joint force in the Indo-Pacific region. This should include strengthening logistics, modernizing infrastructure, conducting exercises and training, and building the capabilities of our allies and partners. Indeed, our approach to the Indo-Pacific should continue to be informed in part by lessons drawn from the European Defense Initiative, or EDI. which has played a decisive role in strengthening U.S. force posture and enhancing the readiness of allies and partners in Europe over the last 10 years. The Department's fiscal year 2025 budget request includes $2.9 billion for EDI-related investments and $300 million for the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative. I am encouraged that the President's budget request would provide significant funding to strengthen America's cyber defenses and develop cutting-edge technologies such as hypersonics, microelectronics, artificial intelligence, 5G, and quantum computing. Our strategy towards China and Russia should not be defined in dollars by how much, but rather where and why we are investing to achieve the greatest comparative advantage. I'm also pleased to see that this budget request prioritizes taking care of our men and women in uniform by providing a 4.5% pay raise and an increase in basic needs allowance eligibility, expanding the benefits for military families. These actions send an important message to the force at a time when recruiting is particularly challenging. With regard to our nuclear strategy, this budget request supports important steps for the modernization of our nuclear triad. Given Putin's reckless behavior and China's rapidly growing nuclear capabilities, we must continue to modernize our strategic forces to reassure our allies and deter aggression from our nuclear-armed competitors. Even as we modernize, we should seek ways to promote strategic stability, reduce the risk of miscalculation, and, if possible, reduce nuclear stockpiles. Finally, the proposed investment in next-generation combat aircraft, tactical vehicles, and naval vessels is a prudent decision. However, there are a number of long-standing challenges for our defense acquisition system that must be addressed to effectively field these platforms. I understand that the military services have made difficult but practical decisions in this budget request to identify supply chain problems, pinpoint shortages in critical materials, and to reinvigorate the Defense Force. In particular, the Navy has requested $2 billion to improve the capabilities of the submarine industrial base, and I would appreciate our witnesses' views on how Congress can help to overcome these issues. Again, I thank the witnesses for their participation today, and I look forward to the testimonies. Now, let me recognize the ranking member, Senator Wicker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today's hearing is an opportunity to take stock in our national security over the past year.